hopefully y'all in the right room. We're doing migrating RKE1 to RKE2. A little bit of an agenda. Y'all can read. We're just going to talk about why is this happening, what can we do about it, and talk about some of the tools. For those of me, Matt Maddox. I've been with Rancher coming up about 7 years now. I do a lot of our training, Rancher Academy, totally free, all that training. Highly recommend you take it because you get a little cert at the end of it. A lot of my tools are posted under support tools. And then I also wrote the book, The Rancher Deep Dive. Please make sure you put quotes around the title because Amazon likes to show adult books. And I will let you fill the rest of that in. Yes. Second edition is scheduled to drop towards the end of this year. If y'all want a copy or an early release, just ping me. I'll send you the Google Docs. I don't make anything off the book. The publishers make all the money. I am a Kubestronaut too. Got all 5. I've got the Infinity Stones. And then I also run the blog support.tools. I will give a legal disclaimer. SUSE has no editorial control over support.tools. That is my blog. I write everything on it. So make the lawyers happy. You know, those are my views and opinions, not those of my employer. So, and of course, I hate slides. I think that's where data goes to die. This entire talk is already published on my blog. Just the article version of this talk. It's not like a slideshow or anything like that. Just threw it in ChatGPT and said, okay, convert this into an article, and then updated it. This also goes in, there's about 5 or 6 articles linked off of this post that dive into the actual tools that we're going to talk about today and give examples and commands, so don't feel like you got to rush and write stuff down or anything like that. So, cool. Okay. So this is kind of the $1 million question that gets everybody really upset with us. Why do we got to move from RKE1 to RKE2? Long story short, RKE1 is built on basically on Docker, with RKE2 built on Containerd. There's also a fundamental shift on how the tool works. RKE1 was built to be managed externally, meaning you have an external binary that builds the cluster, updates the cluster, adds, removes nodes, the whole kit and caboodle, aka the RKE command. RKE2 flips the script. The cluster takes care of itself. You don't tell a node to join the cluster, you tell a node, go to this endpoint and find out all you need to know to join that cluster. You want to remove a node, you just delete it, and the cluster takes care of itself. Rancher you don't see it like moving certificates around or standing up etcd. RKE2 is taking care of that all inside the cluster. So there's a fundamental shift. And I'm going to be really careful on how I speak about this, but there was about 3 projects that were attempted to make it work, doing an in-place upgrade, and it just failed. I mean, we couldn't get it to succeed at a level that we could put our names on it and call it a product. So at this point, there is no migration path. There is some projects, you might find them on GitHub. Most of them have been archived at this point. Those are those 3 projects I was talking about. But just be aware that's outside of support. It's outside of our SLA agreement. Go at your own pace. The other big thing, why RKE2? Originally RKE2 was called RKE Government because it was just the government's flavor of RKE with all the FIPS and security and all that cool stuff. That's why RKE2 really doesn't have a hardening guideline, guide like we used to have in RKE1, because it's already pretty darn hardened from the get-go. Thanks to Uncle Sam. The other thing too, there's the official announcement of the end-of-life date. I cannot speak to any of y'all about extensions, all that kind of stuff. They just reach out to your CSM. They'll help you. I know we've done it for some customers. I do not know how long they're going to do it for. That is not my department, not my responsibility, not my area. So be aware the train is going to come to a stop at some day, and y'all need to move. So Cool. So, my big thing when I wrote this talk, I'm like, well, why do I want to give a talk about something you're hopefully only going to ever do once until whatever we come up with RKE3 and some new AI technology or something crazy like that. So I kind of wrote this talk as more of a generalized talk of migrating between Kubernetes clusters that just so happen to be going from RKE1 to RKE2. And because of that, I also did this talk as more of how do you DR your clusters? Because what is a migration but a DR that you just do not activate just yet? So all the tools I'm going to talk about here can be used for the migration. It's also a way to sell it to your management of, guys, this is our DR strategy as well. So if we need to buy licenses, we need to buy dev time. Right, there you go. That's how you sell it. So, cool. Of course, this talk, you can do, RKE1 to EKS, EKS to GKE, kind of whatever, as long as it's a certified Kubernetes cluster. It should just work. Be aware that there is fundamental differences between providers. Things like going from RKE1 to EKS. EKS does not give you an ingress controller by default. It has different storage class names. There is subtle differences that might trip you up, especially when it comes to permissions. There's a lot of stuff in the hosted environment that you can't do because you don't have access to do it. Turning on Kubernetes API audit logs. You have to go through like a bunch of extra steps to get to that kind of stuff. RKE2, you just check mark a box and it's on. So, cool. Of course, we all know disaster recovery. One of the kind of scariest things I see in our industry is nobody ever really thinks about what happens when sleepy 3 a.m. Matthew that maybe had a few too many beers accidentally deletes my production cluster. How quickly could you rebuild that cluster? And I'm not saying I've ever done it, but we've had plenty of customers that a developer got pissed off and just deleted all the clusters and deleted the backups. Uh-oh. And it's one of the things I want you, when you guys go back to your management, of have that discussion, have that kind of disaster recovery talk of, okay, how quickly could I rebuild my cluster? Are your backups shipped off the box? RKE2 has backups turned on by default. You have to go out of your way to turn them off, but they are local. If I log into your vCenter and delete all 3 of your master nodes, and you don't have them shipped off somewhere else, I've just deleted your production data and I've deleted your backups. And there's no magical key inside Rancher. We don't have some secret hidden data that stores your cluster. So have those conversations. Another thing that trips up a lot of new players, when I say S3, I mean any S3 compatible storage provider. I think the only one that kind of trips us up is Azure, because it's not really fully S3, it's kind of fake S3. For your on-prem folks, talk to your storage dudes. As a former storage dude myself, a lot of enterprise storage will do S3. We're talking about gigabytes of data, if that. So, I always make the joke, go get a box of donuts, go to your storage team and say, can I get an S3 bucket from you? I don't need highly available, I don't need crazy, throughputs. I mean, we're talking about a couple hundred megabytes a day and only a couple days worth of backups. So it's not a lot of data, but it's one of those things, if I have that S3 a backup and I have the token for your cluster, I can rebuild your entire cluster from scratch. I can even build it in my environment if I really wanted to. RKE2 has made that process much easier. It's actually just baked right into the RKE2 process. We call it cluster reset. You point it to the snapshot, and it just takes care of everything. You don't need to do any kind of weird shenanigans with etcd tools or any of that stuff anymore. It's just baked right into the tool. So, of course, ideal world and kind of the philosophers would say, well, hey, just redeploy every single one of your applications, build a brand new cluster and redeploy. And if you're that far on your Kubernetes journey, I will buy you a beer at that point. But let's be honest, a lot of us are not that far in our journey. Not a lot of us want to spend the money to get that far in our journey. So we need to really take DR testing and how do we just recover our clusters serious. The other thing too is storage. A lot of people forget. That's easy backups. do not have a single ounce of your volume data in it. It has the definition of your volume, but not the actual data that's inside the volume. If an app team goes in and deletes all the PVCs, goes, oh, I'm just going to delete the namespace and recreate it, and uh-oh. And it's like, yeah, I can recreate the PVCs. I mean, nothing in it. I mean, good for you. So, again, as like Dave Nolan pointed out yesterday, I have a saying that I learned at IBM. Nobody ever got fired for having too many backups. I want you to have too many backups. I want you to, when something happens, it's no big deal. Just, okay, we'll just roll back, no big deal. The other thing is foundational changes. There is a lot of what I call foundational settings in Kubernetes. There are settings that once you set them, you are stuck with them for the life of your cluster. Kind of the classic examples is your CIDRs. Unless you're one of our folks at Calico Enterprise, once you pick that CIDR, end of story. If you run out of IP addresses, nothing I can do to help you. If you need to reorganize it and do /22s instead of /24s, sorry. You can go to Calico Enterprise. Calico Enterprise does support migrating between CIDRs. It's like the #1 reason we see customers buying Calico Enterprise is that they do support that. You can change CIDRs after the fact. So if you're ever stuck in that position, you do have that option. The other thing too is more around hardening. For those that have never hardened their clusters before, hardening after the fact is actually very difficult. And it's not so much difficult from a Kubernetes administrator perspective, it's difficult from your application's perspective. Because an app that worked yesterday suddenly doesn't deploy today because I've turned on keyboard and keyboard goes, hey, why are you trying to run as root? Block. And now you're playing whack-a-mole and trying to fix the issue. So again, one of the things when you're designing these new clusters is something to think about. Okay, let me go talk to my auditors, let me go talk to my security folks and say, okay, are we going to turn on all the hardening setting? There's profiles for the CSI benchmark, and you say which profile you want. I think it's like 1.6 is what we're currently on.
Actually, we recently updated that and just say profile CIS, and it picks
Oh.
the appropriate profile for your version of Kubernetes now.
Neat. So the nice thing about that, give that to your auditor. You go on the Rancher docs page, and it says, here's our report. Turn it over to the auditor, end of discussion, walk away. And to be honest with you, I have yet to see really a valid reason to differ from the policy. Things like etcd encryption and stuff like that, it's just turned on by default. Again, you have to go out of your way to turn that off in RKE2. Thank you, Uncle Sam. The other thing is the container runtimes. RKE2 owns and manages containerd. You do not install it, you do not update it, you do not patch it. It owns that binary, end of story. And it will take care of that binary for you. Same thing with kubelet, and kube API, and all that other shenanigan stuff. You can, of course, override those. Like if you need like a particular version of etcd, you can simply just override the image version. But there's also, this goes back to the fundamental changes. RKE1, everything was a Docker container. We didn't care about the OS because we weren't running anything in the OS. Everything was in the Docker engine. AKA Rancher OS was a thing of an entire OS inside of a Docker engine. RKE2, we break that mold a little bit. We do run things outside of it. The RKE2, we call it the RKE2 supervisor process, aka the RKE2 binary, runs naked on the OS. It starts up, because that is what starts up containerd, and then starts starting up everything else. So you will have things like service, systemd, be able to start and stop RKE. The nice thing is that's the only thing that runs outside of it is the RKE2 binary. It's a Go binary. It's all self-contained. We don't need any external libraries or anything like that. So as patching we don't care about that stuff. The other thing too is your ingresses. RKE2 is still using Ingress Nginx. Feature direct compatibility, there's no changes. I think they're even running the same versions, to be honest with you. It is important to note RKE2 is really K3S Enterprise Edition. So you can, if you so choose, run Trafic or app gateway, or any of the other cool ingress controllers. For those that don't know, you can actually run multiple ingress controllers in a cluster. It's really, really neat. But just be aware of that, of, hey, if you want to make that decision, right now, if all your apps are assuming the default is Nginx and you swap out with Trafic, all those Nginx annotations that I added to my ingress, suddenly that's not going to work anymore. So you need to plan that stuff. Same thing with your storage. It's not really usually an issue, to be honest with you. I mean, unless you're just not defining your storage classes in your applications. You know, hey, if I'm moving to Longhorn, or I'm moving to Portworx or some other cool tool, you know, now's the time. If you're going to be building a brand new cluster, now's the time to make those decisions, and you're getting a fresh start. The other thing too is, especially when you're migrating, don't make your lives harder, guys. If you're running 128 in RKE1, try to run 128 in RKE2. RKE2's been a while, and I would prefer you to downgrade and go to an older version of RKE2 and run for that for a little bit while you migrate and then upgrade later. If you didn't hear this from me, RKE2 will totally let you do a downgrade. We just don't support it and don't recommend it. So if you're on a 128.11 and it causes a bug, I have no problem with you, and this is Matt speaking, not Rancher or SUSE speaking, I have no problem with you going back down to 128.5 or whatever. That's not a problem. Usually the bigger problem is like 128 to like 127. And an API version, the key thing is upstream doesn't support that. They do not have any migration methods to go back. So if V1 beta 1 was turned into beta 2, and suddenly you downgrade and now beta 2 is no longer available, there's no method in there to swap that back. Be aware, RKE2, SUSE does not build a single bit of the binary that is in etcd, Kube API, kubelet, kube scheduler, and kube controller. That is 100%, we just pull down upstream, we do the checksums, we do the validation, all that stuff. But we do not build that. We are just pulling down upstream. So if you have a bug with it, you got to go to upstream. So cool. So there's really 3 different methods of migrations. And I'm going to tell you right now, everybody's going to do it differently. And it really 100% depends on your team and your apps and your business. And these are kind of those conversations. I've had these with customers where you really just need to kind of sit down and say, okay, how do we want to do this? Have those conversations of risk. You know, yes, it's July 31st or whatever. Your CSMs, I'm sure if sales are coming up, they're more than happy to give you an extension for a small fee. So it's not like there's a gun to your head. For those that aren't aware, Ratio Telemetry, we still have 1.6 clusters checking in from the community. They're no longer supported. We don't give support to them anymore, but they're still out there. So it's not like your clusters are going to turn off on July 31st. Cool. We're going to dive into the different scenarios. The first one is what I call lift and shift. And again, this comes from my storage background. Every time you buy a new storage array, you take everything that's on the old guy, you pick it up, and you throw it down on the new guy, and you walk away. And this is what kind of the fastest approach, and it's actually pretty successful, which is kind of scary, of just take the sledgehammer approach. I'm going to pick up everything as is. I ain't going to change squat. I'm not going to change versions. I'm not going to change technologies. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to pick it up and drop it down. So, and of course, this is done, and I have this in my blog article, of just -o YAML. I have a bash script that goes in and says, okay, find all namespace scoped resources in this namespace, -o YAML them, go on this side. Okay, we're going to do some set and replace and remove things like UIDs and version numbers and cluster IP addresses and a few other odds and ends. And then we're going to QCTL apply on the other side. I'm not changing anything. I'm not changing storage classes. I'm not changing secrets. I ain't changing nothing. And if you take that approach, that's the mindset you have to have. is my new cluster has to be as unbelievably close to my old cluster as humanly possible. The moment you start saying, well, maybe you want to swap out OPA Gatekeeper for keyboard, and okay, good luck with that. Or, hey, we're getting rid of Istio, or we're going to some other service mesh, which is cool, but just be aware that the sledgehammer approach is just not going to work for you. You're going to have lots of problems. Traditionally, when I see this work, is they say, okay, we're just going to take the whole cluster as a whole. We're going to take a 4-hour maintenance window. We're going to shut everything down. We're going to scale it all to 0. We're going to export everything. We're going to import everything on the other side. We're going to flip over the VIP and go and talk to our networking teams and update the load balancer to say point to the new cluster. And we're going to start turning stuff on. And about 95% of the time, it just works. All those kind of weird of, oh yeah, we changed that secret 2 years ago, or all that kind of stuff, just, I don't care. I don't care if it's not in your code. I'm just picking everything up. But be aware, if you're doing external things like, oh, I'm using Vault for my secrets. Well, you got to make sure you get Vault set up on the other side, because it's not a namespace scoped resource. It's going to come up and go, okay, let me reach out and get my secret. Uh-oh, I don't have this service there. Or in the couple times it's gone bad, it's usually like version differences of, oh, we were using a really old version of Vault. We upgraded to a newer version of Vault, and when we deployed it on the new cluster, and suddenly, oh, it's not working. And you're sitting there, and that 4 hours while everything's down and executives aren't happy with you, you're troubleshooting. So especially when you're doing this, your goal is 100% to keep it as close as humanly possible. Match exact versions, do not differentiate. And if you do start changing things, you need to start testing that. You need to do a test cutover and say, okay, we're going to do this for our dev, we're going to do this for our QA clusters, we're going to do this. And any kind of changes you're making, write them out as patches. For those who don't know, ChatGPT is actually really good at writing kubectl patch commands. So, the one that I see a lot is this rolling migration. I see this a lot where customers that have lots of small clusters, or where they do want to make foundational changes of, hey guys, we want to move to Trafic, or we want to move to API Gateway, or some other cool technology. You gotta break it into groups. And you gotta say, okay, we're gonna move these namespaces. But you also gotta make sure that you really work closely with your application teams, you find your dependencies. There's some cool tools in Cilium that'll show you dependencies from the network perspective. There's also some cool tools from the Calico Enterprise dudes have a cool service discovery tool that will show you what it's reaching out and what it's doing. But just be aware that there's more risk. You're making changes now. We're changing the tires on a car while it's going down the highway. Better hope that tire's the exact same size. So now we're putting a bigger tire on it. So we got to really be patient, be very methodical with it. When you run into bugs, document it. Have a good backout plan too. It's another thing I've seen a lot of teams fail is they'll open a sub 1. They're halfway through their change and they can't roll back because they've already started stuff up and databases are running and now transactions have happened. What's your rollback strategy? How do you fail back to the old cluster? Okay, we bump the increment and we can go extract those transactions and reload them into our old environment. Have those conversations with your app teams. The phased migration. Sales guys love this because I'm going to build a new cluster. I'm going to tell my application teams, migrate, let me know when you're done. And in two years from now, you finally get to turn off that cluster. Again, sales guys love it because you're paying us twice. I hate it because those clusters, people tend to not take care of them. They're not getting updated. Oh, it's going away, it's going away, it's going away. So then suddenly 2 years from now, that cluster that was going away is still there. Again, I like it because then we get paid extra, but I really, at least from a support perspective, I don't want you to do this, to be honest with you. Unless your application teams are very far along on their DevOps journeys, where if your application teams can say, oh yeah, I can go into my Jenkins job, swap out a cluster name, run the job, and my entire app deploys to a new cluster. If you can do that, buy them a beer, because they're doing awesome. Okay, but let's be honest, how many of our application teams don't know how to do that? Cool. So, and of course, cons. They always have very long tails. You move a couple really big apps, but then, oh, we got this major release coming up. We'll do it the next quarter, and then 2 years later. Again, choosing the way that's right for you. These are the 4 big ways that I found that get very good success with doing the migrations. Be aware that you need to understand what your apps are doing. If your apps are high transactional applications, that thou shall never lose a transaction, because that could be $1 million stock buy. And if you lost that transaction, it's a resume generating event, as my old boss would say. Or, oh no, it's WordPress. I don't care. We'll just do a code freeze. We'll turn it read only for 24 hours. Everything's good. So again, totally depends on your apps. Of course, the redeploy. If your app teams could do it, tell them go right ahead. I've seen some customers take this as kind of a first shot of, okay, let's see how good we are, and then kind of just backfill. The number one issue that I usually see with this is database secrets. People love to manually create database connection strings because they don't want it part of their code, and they don't want to deal with external secret providers and all the other fun stuff. So they just, we'll just create the secret. They go help them deploy on the other side, and suddenly their app won't start up, and they're debugging it, and it's like, oh, I'm missing a secret. So the nice thing about that's relatively easy to fix. Go grab -l YAML, apply. The other big thing is pv-migrates. Again, unless you're really far in your Kubernetes journey, I can deploy a WordPress site via Helm. That's awesome. But all the data is in the database and in the file system. How do I get that data over? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's ways to do that, but you need to be aware of that. Okay, yeah, I got the app running, but there's no data there. All the important stuff isn't there. So, also, it's a really good time, especially if you want to talk to your management. Now it's time to invest if you want to learn Terraform. For those that aren't aware, as long as you have a valid Rancher support contract, the Terraform 2 provider is an SLA product. It's part of Rancher. You can open up cases against it. Just don't ask us to write the Terraform for you. That's professional services if you want support. But we use Terraform. Mr. Dave Nolan over there builds all of hosted Rancher on Terraform. So we eat our own dog food. There is minor bugs, so if you do find issues of, hey, this feature's missing, hold us to the fire, open up a ticket against us, and say, I need this. Okay, this is kind of the sledgehammer approach. And mind you, I also have a tool that I created, both a bash script and a Go script to do this, of just walking through your entire cluster, saying, okay, give me all cluster scope resources, put them in a folder, and -l YAML them all. And then I walk through all namespaces, get all namespace scope resources, and -l YAML them all. Be aware, it is a sequential script. I've had it run on some very big clusters, and it's taken like a couple days to walk through the cluster because it is going serial. I originally wrote this for a customer because they had a dev that liked to delete namespaces and not tell them until a week later, and then suddenly they're trying to get secrets back, but SEDs have already rolled off. So the nice thing about this is it's just YAML. If you want to go browse to the directory and go grab the YAML file and reapply it, go right ahead. Again, these are YAMLs. I'm not backing up your data. I'm not backing up your volumes. Okay, Cloud Casa. There is I always see it as Velcro, but it's Valero, is the open source version of it. Cloud Casa is the SaaS version of it. They have a really cool blog article that they wrote, and there's also a YouTube video. I highly recommend checking it out. That's explicitly about migrating from RKE2 to RKE1 to RKE2. Be aware, it is a paid service. You pay for the storage, or you can buy storage from them and you license it. So if you're like me and are very cheap and prefer things free, you might try the Valero. Personally, I think it's way too darn complicated. Nothing against Cloud Casa. I think their managed solutions are very nice and it's very user friendly and it's all in the UI. But it is a paid service, so I don't even think they have a free version if I remember correctly. I don't have it on this, but there's also the Veeam guys have Kasten or K10s, however you want to say it. They do have a paid offering as well, and I believe it's free for like 5 nodes or something like that. They're really pushing it hard, so you might be able to get a free trial out of them. Cloud Casa guys have been really, every time I've worked with them, they've always been super nice. They've always been super flexible if bugs happen. And the other thing too with these dudes is the restore they don't have a way to stage resources. So if let's say I have a 10 terabyte PVC and you're backing up with Cloud Casa, it's sitting up in a bucket somewhere, and you go, okay, we're gonna fail over. I'm gonna start the restore. I have to pull 10 terabytes from my S3 bucket down to my on-prem and start loading up the data, and it's sequential. And it's going to walk through every single PVC as part of that restore job. So make sure you break up your restore jobs, and also be aware of that. You can't stage any of the data. Like you can't do like a forever recovery. I believe it's on a roadmap. Don't quote me on it. That's just what I've heard. Cool. This is actually a tool I wrote for this talk. I wrote about 2 weeks ago and worked on it last night. It's called DR Syncer. I wrote it for a customer that came to me and said, hey, why can't I not just continuously export and import into my old cluster, my production cluster into my DR cluster, okay, sync to my DR environment? So I wrote him a Go tool. I used it as an excuse to learn Claude and Klein, and entirely wrote the app in 2 weeks, all using AI-driven. I'll be publishing a blog post later, probably next week, about it. So it is a little rough on the edges. Take it, be nice with it. But I am looking for feedback. This is a map tool. This is not a SUSE tool. SUSE is not involved in any of this. So you do not pay for any of it or anything like that. But the key thing here is the customer, they were hitting that Cloud Casa issue of, shit, how do I move 10 terabytes of volumes? And they had a lot of data. This tool has rsync underneath the covers, and I have it set up so that it will rsync the volumes on a schedule. So it sits there and will slowly sync over your data, so you can let it just sit there as either your migration, pre-stage everything, get all the volumes. Okay, we're gonna do a final shutdown, do one final sync, and turn it on. By default, it is set to scale everything to 0 and turn off cron jobs. And then it leaves an annotation on there that says here's what it originally was. So when you go to activate it, you read that annotation, and there's a activate part of the script that says, okay, go back to the original size. So again, this is Matt's cool script. I am looking for feedback. There's also a command line if you don't want to deploy the whole controller and everything. It can work with Rancher. You can just use Rancher kube configs, but it is designed to also just work independently, and it doesn't necessarily need to be an RKE cluster. It can be, like all my testing, if you actually look in there, there's a bunch of test scripts. They're all using DigitalOcean so clusters because they were just easier to spin up. The other one is Longhorn. For those that don't know, I'm a storage dude, so I love Longhorn. I've been using Longhorn since 0.6, if I remember correctly. Longhorn it's not going to do anything with your apps, but we do have disaster recovery volumes. So if you already are backing up your volumes, you can install Longhorn in your DR cluster, point your DR cluster to the backup target, and say, go ahead and restore these volumes and keep restoring them. Every time you see an incremental backup, go ahead and restore that incremental. So the nice thing is, you have that 10 terabyte volume, it's sitting in your DR. Maybe it's 1 cycle behind or it's in the middle of doing a restore, but you're not restoring 10 terabytes as part of your your disaster recovery plan at that point. Be aware, you need to pay for that. Your DR cluster might not be using a lot of compute, but it's going to use a lot of storage because effectively you're keeping a full copy of the data. Some customers will do, well, hey, it's DR, I'm okay with going down to 2 replicas or maybe only 1 replica. And then when I go to actually declare a DR or do a DR test, I'll scale out and let it replicate and build more. The key thing is it's not real time. I know there's been a feature in Longhorn for a while to do that, of doing a continuous replication. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think it's just an architectural issue. And it's also, it is not snapshot based. So if you have snapshots and you're taking a snapshot every hour, that's not going to be replicated. It's your backups that are going to be replicated. Actually offloading snapshots are just point in time recovery points in the file system. So be aware of that. So if you're only backing up once a day, your RPO or RTO, one of those two, is 24 hours at most. So be aware of that. This is, of course, not a paid feature. It's just built right into Longhorn. Another really cool tool that I like, and it's totally open source, pv-migrate. This is a really cool wrapper around rsync. You can use this to migrate between this volumes in the same namespace. So if you are changing a source class, say, okay, I want to go from silver to gold. Cool. It just mounts a pod, hooks up both volumes to it. It does use a really clever trick, and that read write once volumes. There is nothing stopping you in Kubernetes from having multiple pods mount the same volume, even if it's a read write once volume, as long as they just so happen to be on the same node. So you can hook up this temporary pod to your live data, do the rsync and ship it to your DR facility. Or, hey, I need to refresh my staging environment. So I'm just going to hook this up. Be aware, though, it does use a load balancer. So it spins up a load balancer resource in your DR cluster. So if you don't, like if you're on-prem and you don't have a cloud provider load balancer, you probably should. You might need to deploy something like MetaLB. Also, if you're running in DigitalOcean, they like to take their sweet time spinning up load balancers, so it might take like 10 minutes because it's waiting on the load balancer. The nice thing is it's just rsync. So if you can rsync the data, great. You can pass all the rsync flags that you would like into it, and it just works. Of course, the cons is it's just rsync. Do you really want to rsync a Postgres database at a file system level and hope that it comes up on the DR side? Might not work, but to each their own at that point. But yeah, this is just a really cool tool to have in your toolkit no matter what, and it's totally open source. Cattle Drive. You might have heard us talk about this a little bit before. This is a SUSE product. I wouldn't say a product, really a tool. This is a tool that was created to basically sync over all the projects and all the permissions related to that project. So if you have 1,000 projects and you've defined a ton of developers and you've done all this hard work over how many years to narrow down all your permissions, you go build another cluster, do you really want to create 1,000 projects again and track down all the permissions? Cattle Drive does that. It syncs also the namespaces, but it just creates empty namespaces. So again, this is more of a toolkit in your box at that point. Personally, if it's like under 10 projects, I'm not going to go through all the hard work of getting this set up. I'm just going to create it by hand. It's probably faster. But if you have, again, 1,000 projects, yeah, it's going to be a fun adventure. Be aware that you also do need the source cluster to be up and running. So if you've deleted the source cluster, there's nowhere for this to pull that information. Because what it's doing is it's reaching into Rancher and saying, give me all the CRDs from Rancher that are related to this, and copy them over and figure out the new IDs and assign them properly. Cool. Some of the classic issues that I see. CRDs. A lot of times people forget a lot of cluster services. You forget cert manager, or they forget Argo CD, or all those little things that have been quietly running in our clusters and have been working great, and we've totally forgotten because they're just that darn good. It always seems to bite us in the butt. For those that are unaware, kubectl API resources, that command, it's weird because it's not like a get command. You can get all namespace scoped resources that way. And you can also do, oh no, that's cluster scoped. If you turn that to true, it'll say give me all CRDs that are namespace scoped. So if you're doing things like pod monitors or service monitors and all these other cool CRD stuff, that'll tell you what CRDs are available in your cluster. So, and DR Syncer, you can turn that on, and it will sync that as well. The other one, of course, is secrets. Again, database credentials are the one that I almost always see. People create a database connection string, create the secret when the app was deployed 5 years ago, and now suddenly, where is it now? So be aware of that. If you're using an external KMS or Kubernetes management service, whatever, it's a way to encrypt secrets. Be aware of that. Now, in theory, if you're kubectl getting a secret minus -l YAML, Kubernetes is taking care of the decryption and giving you an unencrypted value back. It's just a base64 encoded value back. But if you're like, oh, I'm taking a etcd backup, and I do have a tool for doing this, of taking an etcd backup and extracting data out of it directly, be aware that you're going to extract secrets that are encrypted. And they're intentionally encrypted in such a way that it's not easy to recover them. And Rancher, we do not have a magic tool to get that. That is something super, super important with RKE2. And when you build an RKE2 cluster, it will generate a token for you. That is the encryption key for your cluster. It will never change. There's no way to change it. That is also, we are using that to encrypt the etcd encryption key. So the encryption key lives inside of a secret inside etcd that's encrypted with that token. If you lose that token, I cannot get it back. You might be able to extract that out of Rancher. I've done it a couple times, but if you like delete a cluster, you've deleted, and it's okay, I don't have the tokens anymore. Sorry, it's AES encrypted data. It's intentionally made to not be recoverable. So please, please, for the love of God, grab that token, throw it in a password manager. It's not that hard to do. Throw it in a password manager, print it on a piece of paper, stick it in your boss's desk. It's one of those things that you will be thanking yourself if you have it, and if you don't have it, I have to be the one that says, sorry, you have to rebuild. And you can't even restore from backups, even if you have backups, because the backups are encrypted. So be aware of that. Also, don't store it with your backups. Please do not store your encryption key that's encrypting your backup with your backup. But just grab that. The nice thing is it never changes. So you can just throw in a password manager or whatever and hope you and pray you just never have to touch it again. The other thing too that I really encourage people to do is, especially if you're going to be taking not so much the lift and shift approach, but you're going to be doing a full migration, invest in Argo CD, invest in your GitOps processes. I like Fleet. I personally use Argo CD a lot better. But now's the time. Now's the time to ask for those dev hours of, hey, I want to make this work so that if I need to redeploy a cluster, I just point it to a repo and say, put all the cluster services. Now, you might not have to do it with your apps. I personally use it for cluster services. My ingress controllers, my cert manager, my Cilium, all those kind of standard deployments, even Prometheus usually, where I just want all my clusters to look the same, have the same versions, same everything, and it just works. So invest that time, talk to your management, and say, please give us the hours, the dev time to do it the right way. Also document. This is something that really can slow down support cases, is people not knowing IP addresses, not knowing where stuff is at. Be aware, RKE2, we do change how we do clusters a little bit, in the sense that in RKE1, Your standard recommendation was 3 etcd nodes, 2 control plane nodes, and however many workers you want, up to 250. And then at that point, you have to talk to us. RKE2, we now go 3 master nodes, and then however many worker nodes that you want. We are co-locating etcd and kubeAPI together. It is a huge performance boost because newer versions of Kubernetes will do dirty reads directly against the same etcd node that's on them, which is like 80% of most transactions in Kubernetes. So it's a huge performance boost if you co-locate them. You totally can still segregate them if you want, still have dedicated etcd nodes and still have dedicated control plane nodes. I just wouldn't recommend it because you're shooting yourself in the foot. Cool. Okay, demo time. Cool. Top cluster is my production cluster. Bottom is my DR cluster. I'm going to run one of my test scripts. What this is going to do is it's going to actually deploy to my production cluster. It's going to deploy to my production cluster. So you can see all those resources popped up. The controller, it's currently set up to do every minute. It does a sync. So you see it automatically pulled over the services, the deployment, everything. The key difference here is everything's scaled to 0. So the nice thing about this, especially if you're running in a hosted environment, you run like a node in your other regions. You pay for the storage, but you don't pay for the compute. And when it comes time to actually activate it, scale up, run that bill. So there's like 20 some odd test cases in there. I tried to make this tool extremely customizable. You can add labels and say, ignore this, or I only want you to sync these resource types. It also will sync volumes as well. And you can like tell it to change storage classes and stuff like that. You can also tell it to change namespaces. So if you want to name it, Matt's Cool App in production, but then Matt's Cool App -dr in your DR cluster. I like that because then it reminds me which cluster I'm on, so I don't freak out and go, why is everything not running? Cool. So I'm going to open it up to questions then, because I know we're running out of time here. Cricket, 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 cricket. So, as always, RKE2, I really like it. We've been using it internally from the beginning, hosted ranchers on K3s. Be aware, you will see K3s a lot in the code. It is K3s. It's really just a modified version of K3s. It is feature for feature, so there's nothing in RKE1 that's not in RKE2, unless it's like some explicit reason. So, oh yes.
So if you install it, RKE2 via the YAML repo you guys have out there, you said that it updates downstream the container D, etc. I assume that then we have to do a YAML update against the RKE2 repo just to keep all that up to sync, or would you do the container D update?
So to summarize the question, it's called how does RKE2 upgrades work? So RKE2 takes care of its own upgrades. When there's a controller built into RKE2 called the System Upgrade Controller, very uniquely named, that simply just says, here's the versions I would like you to be on. When you go into Rancher and you do an upgrade, all we're doing is we're reaching into that CRD and saying, you go to this version, please and thank you. So why you could do downgrades. What it's doing underneath the covers is it's going and basically running that RKE2 install script again. It's pulling down the binaries. You can override that and pull your own private binaries or private images if you're air-gapped. But it's just simply setting newer versions. Now, not every upgrade is going to require container D to do it. By default, it follows our zero downtime upgrade strategy of cord in the node, but don't drain it, and then basically just quickly swap out the container D process. If container D is not being upgraded, your pod's actually right through the upgrade. You just see the node will disconnect for a few seconds and then reconnect, and it's because we had to restart kubelet. But your pod's right through it. Be aware though, not every application likes that, especially a lot of the database that are database operated. Database is deployed by an operator. They don't like that suddenly their pods went away and came back. you can tell it to go ahead and drain the node if you so choose. Be aware, personally, I don't do that because I find that's a lot more disruptive to drain all my nodes one at a time. You can also tell it how many you want at any given time. You say like, oh, okay, I'll do 10 workers at once if I have 100 nodes or whatever. That's all configurable by those plans. And then Rancher is just managing that plan on your behalf, and you can always override it. So, good question.